Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Torin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I will be playing the Beastmen, and I'm going to be facing off against the Dwarves. You can see are already bombarding me and making pretty good contact with our Minotaurs over here, so very well played on my Dwarvish opponent's part. I wanted to play the Dwarves this game, but he actually locked him in before I could, and I am indeed playing the Beastmen. You can see this guy taking that cannonball like a champ. So as far as my combination goes, my army build or composition, I have a front line of Ungor herds here who are pretty decent against the Dwarves, and essentially they're just a fodder unit. And one of the nice things about them is they do come with 120 models, and they definitely allow a lot of time for your more elite troops like your Minotaurs, your Centaurs over here, as well as your Lords who are on the Pimp My Ride chariots. You can see their chariots are actually really good against the Dwarves, as you guys have probably experienced against Chaos or any number of factions who like to use them against the Dwarves. They're very hard to deal with. So front line of Ungor herds here, and they are hidden. They do have the stock ability, so on the one bright note, my opponent can't target them with artillery and missile fire until they're very close, but the downside of that is my opponent's just going to target my Minotaurs, so not the best situation, but the stock ability is nice and does allow for some fancy mechanics if you like. So also do have two Ungor Raiders, and Ungor Raiders are obviously much lower tier than pretty much all the dwarf missile troops, but something that I would recommend to you guys that I found to be very successful with Ungors is don't position them in the middle of your army. I used to do that, and they'll simply get focused in kind of a concave style from here and from here. It's very rough. So what you want to do is kind of put the Ungors on one side of the formation, and once the battle starts, you just park them over here and have them fire in at this angle, because then they're going to be out of range of these guys. These guys will have trouble reaching them, and they can kind of work their way from the outside to the in, which I found to be much more effective. So I do have those guys. Minotaurs with shields, two GOREBULLs. I have a Beast Lord on a chariot, and he does have the Horn of the First Beast, which is quite good. It gives a charge bonus. Most of the time it's negated by the Dwarves, but it does have, melee attack, weapon damage, and, immune to psychology, which is okay, but again, against the Dwarves, it's not the most pertinent, but I feel the melee attack as well as the weapon damage is pretty good. And I like it more than the ability Kazrak has, his Scourge, which is just a personal augmentation. I've always been a fan, more of a fan of kind of those group buffs, and I think that is a pretty good choice. I do have a Brave Shaman here with the Lord Beast. He does have the Manticore as well as the Flock of Doom. Though the Dwarves do have the Magic Resist, the Flock of Doom is just such a good ability for how much it costs in regards to Winds of Magic. I think it should be brought in most matchups. So, and I did mention the Centaurs with great weapons over here, trying to find a pocket. So my opponent's forces, he actually has 3 cannons, so he's going balls deep on the cannons. He's just shooting right at these Minotaurs here, and they actually haven't done a whole lot considering how much he invested here. And if he doesn't do more damage before my guys get there, it's going to be a bad day at Blackrock for him. So he does have a Master Engineer, some Dwarf Warriors. He also has the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, most likely to help deal with GOREBULLs. He has Thunders and Quarrelers, which is a nice little mix. You put these guys in the GOREBULLs, you put these on the unarmored targets, and it looks like some Dwarf Warriors. So a mixture of kind of low tier infantry, just because these cannons are so darn expensive. And then he has a Lord right here, and does he have the ring? It doesn't look like he has the ring. He has more Thunders, and then kind of just a combination of Dwarf Warriors and Quarrelers. So pretty tight little army. He has a nice defensive formation on the back, but these Centaurs are very hard to kind of keep up with as the Dwarves, but he doesn't really have any weak points, so we'll see how it goes. Without further ado, let's get started. So right now I'm just kind of running my heroic units into the jungle, or the forest. I always say jungle. I didn't want them to take a lot of missile fire, and you can see the GOREBULLs are following in suit, so I just wanted to tie him up with my melee formation here. And one nice thing is he may not have known I had troops here because of the stock, but now he certainly does, and you can see my opponent reacting immediately. He's getting these Dwarf Warriors into formation, and Dwarf Warriors have a pretty good matchup. Their stats are a lot better than that of the Ungor herd, so it's going to be a good day for my opponent most likely in that matchup. But you can see I do have the 2 Ungor Raiders over here who are teeing off on these missile troops here, and though they haven't done a ton of damage, over the course of the battle, they're going to do quite well, especially considering these Thunders were focusing back here on the the forest, looking for my Centaurs. Now they're actually taking some casualties in regards to their models, so very, very good situation there. Well, one thing, guys, is, as a Dwarf player, I always feel it's a huge liability to bring cannons, especially this many, and all these missile troops. This is a huge amount of resources to protect. And right now, the GOREBULL, though he does a pretty good job actually catching it out and disrupting that charge, the GOREBULL and this Manticore and these other mobile units are going to be so hard to deal with. And you can see the Pimp My Ride chariots in here. He's got his little whip. He's going to town in there having some fun. I love that. It's so funny. But the Ungors are doing okay, actually, considering. And the Ungor herds, the Raiders more specifically, are actually firing in there. And look how much damage they've done to these Thunders already. And, parking them out in the pocket like that, or on the wing more specifically, is pretty good. And, definitely helps them to resist the opponent's missile fire. So right now, the Manticore has landed on the cannon, and my opponent pulls these Dwarf Warriors with great weapons out of auxiliary. They're not going to do that great against the Manticore. Obviously they're meant more against armored units. The Manticores definitely do not meet that criteria. They actually only have 45 armor, but still, they'll do their thing, and hopefully we'll be okay. And the GOREBULL over here is continuing to charge around, and it's so hard to keep track of the GOREBULL, and that's why I love gyrocopters in this build. And the GOREBULL and the Manticore kind of pulled these troops out of auxiliary, and then I was able to sneak in the Centaurs here, who you can see are just going to run rampant now. though they are pretty squishy actually. Centaurs only have 35 armor. They don't have the biggest, kind of defensive stats, with only 20 melee defense. So in sustained combat, they do okay actually, because they hit hard and they do have armor piercing. But even low tier dwarf warriors can get in there, especially these longbeards will be able to beat them down pretty well. So you can see I'm losing some models, and I do get a flock of doom back here as well. So that's something that's really nice with GOREBULLs in general. Just again, in any matchup, you send in your GOREBULLs first, your opponent will immediately envelop them all. Against vampire counts, anyone, they'll send the whole town to deal with them. It's obviously GOREBULLs are a priority target. You want to get rid of them. And, then you just use an overcasted flock of doom and you're going to get huge value. So right now I just have the Pimp My Ride Lord on his what is that, Gore Beast Chariot? Not a Gore Beast Chariot, but Razor Gore Chariot, yeah, riding around. And he's kind of been grouped with the Centaurs, and they're just kind of doing their thing, riding through, shutting down these cannons and various other missile troops. And that was definitely my biggest priority. You can see the Manticore here. He's kind of circling around, just continuing to pressure these guys. But somehow my opponent still has his cannon on fire. This Master Engineer, though he is obstructed now, is still in good shape. So very well played to my opponent, despite, all this madness running around in his back line. He's continuing to do pretty well, and, has some of those missile troops still firing. So I do get another flock of doom here. I'm able to get these 4 warriors, and it looks like these guys might run into it. Does it actually trigger? Yes, it will. And I hit the, Master Engineer, but obviously against heroic units, it's not the best. These chariots are very, very hard to deal with as the dwarves. I wasn't the best at microing in this game because I was kind of focusing on my goon squad over here, but still, just riding around, it's very, very tough. In the front line, the dwarves are holding it pretty well. You can see these dwarf warriors have made pretty good work of these Ungor herds over here. A very favorable matchup. If you look, the 38 melee defense to the 24, they have higher weapon strength. The melee attack's actually the same, believe it or not, but obviously they also have 80 armor, so a very good matchup for my opponent. But still, the Ungors didn't perform terribly, so not a bad situation. In the front here, I was able to kind of overwhelm, but my opponent had a group of dwarf warriors that was chasing my missile troops, so I keep having to kind of recycle them, but thankfully I still have 89 models, but he put in some serious work against this group of Ungors, so very, very well played to my opponent. You can see these dwarves in here just fighting like champs. It's always feels bad to kind of slay or go after dwarf players or just dwarfs in general. I don't know, I just feel guilty, but this Bray Shaman's riding around on his chariot. He's going to be pretty helpful in the back line. He's continuing to cast the Flock of Doom. You can see my opponent's Lord got a little overzealous right now. And anytime you're playing the dwarves, you do not want your Lord out on his own, especially with GOREBULLs. You can see he's hungering for blood right now. He gets in there. He's got his antlers out for Harambe. He gets in there and gets a nice little charge and sends that Lord tumbling. And if you wanted to and be really aggressive about it, you could simply keep charging that GOREBULL in, pull him back, charge him in, and I could knock this dwarf Lord over into the Shadow Realm over here. And, you can see the whole town sense blood, and you can see the Manticores coming back and all these troops, and this Lord is definitely not going to have a good time. Dwarf Lords are very sturdy, very tough, 120 armor, and they are shielded, but still, against all these armor-piercing and heavy-duty units, they're going to have a really bad time. So in the back line, my opponent still has some healthy troops. He actually used ballistics calibration, and these guys got the effect of it. Looks like they got some accuracy. So I wonder if that probably doesn't affect it. It's probably only ranged accuracy, but they're getting in there. He still has some Longbeards who are very, very good in the Dwarf and the Beastmen matchup. Longbeards do well. They have that charge bonus against most of these large units. Big fan of the Longbeard in this particular situation, but still, they're slowly starting to get worn down by these chariots, just kind of running rampant through their ranks. And over here, my opponent does have a nice little pocket of resistance. He has some dwarf warriors with great weapons and kind of a mix, but he's still taking that missile fire from my raiders, who are actually starting to wear these guys down. And even though they are shielded, you can see they just lost a model there, they lost another one, and it's all adding up. So a very tough situation for my opponent to be in, considering his dwarf lord got a little overzealous and got knocked away by the GOREBULL. And essentially at this point, I think it might be all she wrote for the dwarves. So we'll go ahead and fast forward a little bit. You can see the Master Engineer in here and these other troops, but this one GOREBULL could honestly take this entire group here. So very well played to my opponent. Definitely a very ballsy strategy, bringing the 3 cannons like that. And as you can see, they really didn't generate their results, and that was honestly, I think, the reason that he had trouble that game. If he had, cut these cannons, had brought some Longbeard, 2 groups of Longbeards and a group of Slayers, I think he would have had a great chance. And also, bring a Runesmith. Just the Runesmith with the Rune of Wrath and Rune could have just shut down my Centaurs, who got 152 kills. So just, again, it's very fun to bring cannons, and it gives you this kind of false sense of security in the beginning of the game, because it kind of lets you think that you can pressure your opponent before they can, and therein you get an advantage. But you're spending so much money. I think bringing 1 cannon isn't a terrible idea, but 1 cannon, 3 cannons plus 2 Quarrelers plus 2 Thunders, that's a big investment to protect. And the Dwarf Warriors, as tough as they are for their cost, it's going to be a tough time to deal with GOREBULLs without the support of Gyrocopters or Slayers or any of that kind of stuff. So anyways, really well played to my opponent, Barathor Walker. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that beast cast. Have an excellent night, and take care.